Hey everybody, welcome back to the Flyin Miata garage. Today we're going to be installing a set of sway bars on this '95 Miata. Alright, let's go over the contents of the kit. Now since we're working on an NA8 or a 1.8 liter Miata, we have a specific set of sway bars for that car. Your bars may look different, but for all NAs and NBs, these instructions will apply. So within the kit, we have our front bar, our rear bar, set of front bushings with new brackets, set of rear bushings, since we'll be reusing the stock brackets, little tube of polyurethane grease for the bushings, and some longer bolts for the end links. Now these longer bolts will only be on the NA bars. Now let's go over the tools that we're going to need for this installation. Because we're working on an older car, got a little PB blaster for some stubborn fasteners. Got a number of drivers, quarter drive, 3/8 drive. The sockets we need, metric sockets, we have a 14, a 12, and a 10. I have shallow and deep, just in case. Got a 14mm wrench, hand ratchet, extension, and when we're all done, we'll tighten things up with the torque wrench. And that will do it. All right, step one is to get the car up and off the ground. Now you can put the car on ramps, on jack stands, or in our case, we have it up on a lift. Since we have the lift, we're gonna get it all the way up so you can see what I'm doing. So we'll raise it up now. So now we have our car all the way up, and you might notice I did leave the wheels on. So my first step will be to remove the splash pan, and I'll do so using a 10mm socket. Now the only thing holding it up is these little bumper support rods. So I'll just pull those down out of the way, which will allow the panel to come down. And we'll set this aside. All right, with the splash pan out of the way, we have full access to our sway bar. So I'm going to begin by removing the end links, but because we're working on a 27-year-old car, I'm going to spray the fasteners with a little bit of PB Blaster. All right, now we'll remove the end links from the sway bar using a 14mm socket on a driver and also a 14mm wrench. We'll set that aside. All right, now our next step is to remove the brackets that hold the sway bar to the chassis. I'll remove those using a 12mm socket. Kind of let it rest for now. So now it's time to remove the sway bar. So we need to slide it out from the side because it's up above our AC lines and our lower radiator hose. So I'm going to pull the bracket off of this side. Maybe the bushing too, make it a little easier to pull off. We're going to get it to where the ends are hanging down. We're going to just slowly, carefully work it out through the driver's side. Make sure it doesn't snag on anything. And we're out. Installation of the front bar is the opposite of removal. I'm going to leave the bushings off for the time being until I have the bar in place. So I'll feed it in from the driver's side and carefully navigate it around all of my lines. Now this bar is a little thicker, so it does take a little bit more work. Okay, we're in. So now that the bar is in place, we'll prep our bushings, get them installed with the new brackets. All right, before we put our bushings on, we're gonna wanna use the supplied grease and grease them liberally. If you don't grease them enough, they could end up squeaking down the road. No pun intended. So I usually just put a hefty bead right in the middle, all the way around. And then because this grease is sticky and gross, I make sure I have a glove on. And I just work it until it's completely coating the entire inner surface that will touch the bar. Okay, now that this one's ready, you'll notice it has a split seam that allows you to wrap it around the bar. So we'll get ready to do that now. Okay, I'll open up the bushing, wrap it around the bar, about where it needs to go. Now I put the seam on facing the back. This seam does not need to face any particular direction. So now we'll do the other side. All right, now it's time to install our brackets. But before we do so, I want to point out that the brackets are slotted. That can come in handy when performing other installations, such as overly thick radiators or fan shrouds. So with that said, we'll get these installed. Before we do so, we want to make sure and get our bar flipped up. We might have to slide it around a little bit because we need to get up and over our tie rods. Now that we're up and over our tie rods, we'll slip these on. Now these use the factory bolts, and when we're done getting them in, we will torque them down to 20 pound-feet. Okay. And now for the other side. Now we'll get these snugged up. And we'll get them torqued down. Now it's time to attach the sway bar to the end links. Now since we're using stock end links, we are able to reuse our factory bolts. We don't need to use the longer ones provided. Now we're only going to put them in loose for now. Because these end links have bushings in them, they need to be tightened while the car is at its ride height. So we'll get them in loose while on the lift. We'll lower the car down to the ground at the very end and get everything tightened up. Now you'll also notice the front bar has 2 holes. This is so you can change the stiffness of the bar. Our default recommendation is to use the rearward hole, which is the softer setting, and that's what this customer has opted for. Okay, now we'll do the other side. So now to wrap up the front, we'll reinstall our splash pan, and then just remember to tighten the end links once the car's on the ground. All right, now we're moving on to the back of the car. Now this side is almost the same as the front, a little easier, a little less stuff to work around. Same process as before. We're gonna start by removing our end links. I've pre-sprayed these with rust penetrant since this is a very old car. So we'll break those loose with a 14mm socket and wrench, and then we'll remove the brackets using a 14mm socket. So we'll do that now. Now for the brackets. And the other side. Now we should be able to remove the bar, slide the brackets off the studs, and work it around the exhaust. Now, we are going to be reusing the stock brackets for the rear bar. So we'll get those worked off and set aside. Now it's time to put the new rear bar in, but the rear bar is a little bit different than the front in that the ends are angled. That angle is to match the angle of the end link on the rear control arm. So we want to make sure that when the bar is installed, the ends match that angle. So the top of the bar will point toward the center of the car. But before we actually put it in place, we're gonna pre-install our bushings. Obviously, we gotta lube them first. Same process as before. Take our grease packet, squirt some in right into the middle. Because the hole's smaller, we'll use my pinky here. Just make sure I get it in on all the contact surface on the inner diameter there. Do the same for the other bushing. Same as before, these have a slot to slip them over the bar. That slot doesn't matter what direction it goes. So I'm going to pre-install these onto the bar. They're going to install in between this 90-degree bend and this little step bend. So one on that side. One on this side. Now with bracket in hand, I'll reorient the bar, make sure we're good, and get it installed. So once we have it in position, we will install our brackets. On this side. Now we're taking our stock hardware, Putting it back on. Once we have them snugged up, we'll torque them to 20 pound-feet. Now it's time to position our end links. Same as the front, we have multiple hole options. Our default recommendation is to use the middle hole. That's what this customer is opting for. If you use the hole closer to the back of the car, that is stiffer, and the farthest hole forward is softer. We're not going to tighten these all the way until we're on the ground, since these end links have bushings in them. All right, that just about wraps up this installation. At this point, we'll lower the car. We'll get a torque wrench on each of those end link bolts and tighten them down to 30 pound-feet. And then we're all set. All right, thank you for joining us as we've installed these sway bars on this 95 Miata. We hope this video helps you with your installation. If you do have any questions, please feel free to call us or send us an email, and we'll be happy to help you out. If you've enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. And if you want to see more content like this, go ahead and make suggestions in the comments. We look forward to seeing you next time.